This is Joe Moriarty, Raven 360. Thanks for taking a look at our new Training-Led Growth podcast. I had a great conversation with Sarah Sedgman, who's the CEO of LearnExperts. But she's had an incredible background. She was with Cognos and IBM and PTC, Canaxis, where she was head of learning and then actually became chief customer officer. So she really ties together the whole training-led growth mindset and methodology, shared a bunch of great information. So thanks for coming again. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can, find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and joe@raven360.com. Love to talk to you. Welcome to another special edition of the Training-Led Growth podcast. I am joined by a great person today, Sarah Sedgman. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the beginning. Let's go right from the beginning. So you came out of University of Waterloo, got a job with Cognos, and it looks like to me right within education. Take us through it. Give us a little of the history of the early career.
Yeah, so I actually thought I would be a teacher. So I have an English degree from the University of Waterloo, which for Canadians, I live in Canada. For Canadians, most people know University of Waterloo specializes in engineering, but there's a tiny little arts faculty. I graduated from it and thought I would be a teacher. And so I landed a 4-month contract at Cognos to do tech writing. So I actually started in the tech writing world. And I thought I'd be going back to Teachers College in the fall and ended up staying at Cognos in technology. I went from tech writing to course development, ended up running the business side of education, primarily focused on customer education, and then worked at a number of companies that you mentioned, and became eventually chief customer officer and part of a C-suite of a tech company by the time I was 40. So a little bit of a flip in where I thought I would, what I would do and where I would be. Very different. I never thought I would end up in technology and in the training space of software. I continued on that track after working at Canaxis, where I was traveling a lot to go visit our customers. Decided I wanted to do less travel and create my own business, where we're innovating every day for the last 2 years as well.
So all that experience led you to Canaxis, where you were at first the chief knowledge officer, which is almost like a chief learning officer, right? Chief knowledge officer. Yeah. But then you went to chief customer officer.
Yeah.
I think that's a really true success story, but also then speaks to the fact that, in that role of knowledge and learning and training, you were putting the customer first. You were basically putting the customer always like, what do we need to do for them? And then that led you to become the chief customer officer. Tell us about that. I think that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. So that was an interesting experience for sure. I joined Canaxis when the company was around 300 people and about 90 million in revenues. It was public by that point, so I can say that. And they realized what a lot of companies who are around that size and scaling realized, which was we can no longer use our subject matter experts to train person to person. We need to start scaling, except we need the expertise and the knowledge that the subject matter experts have. And the CEO, the reason I went there actually was the CEO is a huge advocate around knowledge and knowledge sharing and the customer. And he used to say, we have so much knowledge. This is supply chain software. So much knowledge on the supply chain side. We have deep experts. And yet we can't scale their knowledge as quick as we need to go. And so they wanted my help to figure out how to do that. And how
did you do it?
So we created a training program from scratch, essentially. but because I had 20, well, I guess probably 17, 18 years of experience by that point, and I had worked at large companies and I was involved with associations like TSIA and Sedgman, I knew what the best practices were. And so I knew exactly what to do. I came in with a very specific focus on subscription-based learning. We didn't open any classrooms anywhere. We didn't bear that expense. We had a very specific subscription-based learning program that was mostly self-paced. And we planned out, we looked at every audience equally, and we planned out a program where we could develop content quickly using the experts to help us do it. So we had an expert series, we had self-paced training, we had certification programs that we put into place quite quickly, and it was all for profit. So we didn't do any free training. And we went from $250K to $3 million in 2 years. Wow. With training. And it was through a very specific approach as to what we decided to do and not do so that we could develop once and reuse across multiple audiences and scale very quickly. I have a whole model in my head often that I work with, which is the adoption maturity model. So I kind of baked it up myself, but really it's used to educate companies, executives, those that may invest in the cost of building training, to say, over time, you have to think of training as an overtime thing, a continuous model. And especially in a software company, when thinking of customers, we need to think broader than just the project team. So a lot of tech companies will train the project team as part of the implementation service, because often training organizations have sat traditionally in the services area of the business.
Yep.
And then, a lot of us leave it to the company or our customer then to train the end user. So the implementation finishes, we're like, okay, go live. And the end user part of the business, basically the company will say, we've implemented the solution. Now it's your turn to use it. And there's no change management process. There's no learning about the value of why they need to switch to a new solution. Often the end user doesn't understand why they're being asked to do something different. And so I have always thought it's important to think of the different roles or users and then their continuous learning over time. So the project team, they need to learn how to implement, but they also have additional things that they need to learn over time to advance their learning and become more mature and adopt more of the solution. Same with the end user community, same with the administrative function, all the different roles. And over time, as they continuously learn, they get more impact or can optimize using the solution better, and in turn become advocates or champions, like you said, of the solution. And then it becomes really sticky. I would say a lot of companies go to map out the customer success journey or look at the customer success, but through their own viewpoint. Right. And when they do that, they actually miss a lot of the important pieces that the customer needs. And a lot of that actually has to do with learning and knowledge pieces. And the customer then ends up not satisfied or not adopting the solution to the best capacity and not being advocates. So I often like to pair those two pieces together and say, they have to go hand in hand really to be successful.
Yeah, I tell you, you hit the nail on the head for me regarding like one of the core foundations of our belief in the training-led growth, methodology. It's the same thing that you're talking about, which is, give the customer what they need, give them a great experience, get them really knowledgeable in using as best they can, because fundamentally users want to be using something effectively. If they're not using something effectively or they're not having a good experience, that's when they churn, right?
Yeah.
And that's when people reach the end of a contract and they're like, the CFO comes to them and says, hey, are we getting value from this software that we're paying an annual subscription for? Are we getting value? And if those users don't say, yes, it's awesome and I love it, if they say, nah, I don't know, guess what happens?
Yeah.
They don't renew, they don't renew. And then the converse on the other side, which is someone says, no, it's great. It provides value. These guys are great. They've come out with this new feature and that's going to be awesome. And I really want to use it because it's going to make my life better. And I get to spend more time with my family. That's what you want. That's the evangelism, right? That I think this education and knowledge transfer and everything you did from being a chief knowledge officer, then to becoming the chief customer officer, I mean, that's what you just described, right? Is like getting your customers to use, adopt, grow, love the product.
A lot of companies miss the opportunity at the beginning to educate, those of us who have been in the industry for a long time, including yourself. Often we may think of just the product training, and to get the product training to stick and get the product to stick, there's actually this 360 view of training that needs to happen around it, which starts with awareness of, which some companies, I guess, call change management, but it's a scary word, but awareness of why a company is investing in that solution in the first place. So they had a business problem. They found a solution to solve it. They invested a lot of money in that solution. They implemented it. They roll it out. And many in the company may miss the awareness around how that solution is going to have an impact on what they do. Often the companies would stall on the user adoption piece. So it would get implemented, it would get rolled out, but the users would, even in some cases with PTC customers, we'd have conversations with the executives to say, we've invested in the solution, but the engineers are secretly still doing their 2D model,
right?
Because that's what they know. They're putting it on the 3D, they're printing it off and continuing on 2D. So how can you help them to recognize the value of the solution and software so that they use the solution we've invested in, and we can all be more efficient, effective, better at what we do. And so when training organizations or companies think through all of those pieces to drive customer success, they're the ones that grow faster. They can scale, they get better adoption, they get really deep advocates, because it's the users that really need to be sold on the solution.
It's interesting. You can look at other technologies that we all probably do business with, right? I mean, Salesforce.com, right? Super successful. I mean, huge CRM, super successful. Almost everybody uses it. I've used Salesforce for years. I use HubSpot now, but everybody knows these technologies. Salesforce, I think, has been successful despite itself with training and learning, because I think that people probably use 10% of Salesforce. And there's a very small percentage of the population, and it's not like I'm trying to do a tear down of Salesforce, but I think it's a good example of what you just said, where people still just do what they're doing. And if you're not giving them like the reasons, the motivations, or the outcomes of doing it better, differently, learning more, getting more knowledge, there's a lot of times people won't do it.
I think a classic example is always Excel. How many of us know how to use Excel more than 5% of what it can do?
Yeah.
But, then you see some people who are really advanced with Excel, and you're just thinking like, how did you know how to do all of that? But when you can do all of those things, they're so much more efficient. Like, you watch how they build all these things into Excel and you're like, wow, that went so fast. Whereas it would have taken me 2-3 hours to do that. So
did you ever remember, and I'm dating myself on this, but when I first started using Excel, this is in like the late 90s, there was actually the engineers at Microsoft, actually it might have been Xerox, I think, where they got it from, but the engineers had built in a flight simulator that you could access, like a secret flight simulator within Excel. Did you know that?
No.
That's crazy. That's dating myself, but that's funny. It's just a funny story because think about that. This like funny little flight simulator in Excel that used to exist. Maybe it still does. I don't even know, but I remember finding it in like some, I was in engineering at the time, and the engineers were like, oh, check out the flight simulator. I'm like, what? But that's a great point. I still probably use 5% of Excel. Let's go back to what you said a little bit about, what COVID obviously I think is going to change things in our world probably forever. I think that people are being forced, and not just in high tech, I think it's really a lot of other industries. High tech's been pretty well ahead on remote learning, distance learning, virtual learning, on-demand, subscription. Like we've been using these words for a while.
Yeah. I think for years and years, way back we were doing instructor-led training, and then for years in the industry, we all talked about, we're all of the, I would say education execs, we're all friends because it's a niche area, especially across North America.
Yeah.
But we thought, okay, this e-learning thing's going to come. It's going to wipe out the whole instructor-led side of the business. We're not going to have anything for our instructors to do. We're going to have to flip, it's different types of costs, all of those kind of things. And it didn't really happen. Like e-learning came and it was supplementary and people used it, but they still relied on person to person. And so I'd say the last few years, there was certainly more progress towards digital-based training or self-paced, or more companies comfortable using learning management systems. Like we see the learning management system industry growth for sure. More companies were using curated learning from places like, or companies like Udemy or Cornerstone.
Yep.
But there was still a lot, especially in this small to mid-size company, that are even now trying to do person to person. And then, people talked about microlearning and subscription and stuff like that, but it was just crawling. We were all like, hey, wait, we thought 10 years ago instructor-led would be wiped out. And in March, the world changed. Everyone sat at home. We looked at each other through the computer like we're doing. And my phone started ringing off the hook. And it was a lot of the companies I had worked with, or I was working with, or people I knew, especially in that small to mid-size area, but also academic. And so other industries I started to get calls from, which was different, with a bit of panic, because the solution still needed to continue. Like you think of academic or school systems, the kids still needed teaching, the university students still needed education, but all of a sudden what they knew couldn't happen anymore, and they didn't know what to do. And so I would say they still don't. I think the industry is behind. So for large companies or tech companies, like you said, perhaps they were a bit ahead because they had some self-paced solutions. But for companies that didn't, or even large companies that didn't have all digital-based learning, the race to switch over to digital-based learning has been intense the last 4 or 5 months. And I think what we're going to start to see, especially as companies' budgets are constrained, they can't necessarily go hire e-learning companies or companies to build it all for them. They're looking at DIY options. How do I, tell me what to do, and then how do I do it myself?
We're seeing a lot more companies want to build their own academies, so their own kind of branded academy experiences even right through their public website. We actually, so we do that. We build these branded academies for our customers, but we did a heat map analysis where we looked at, people just visiting a public website and what do they gravitate to? What links do they go to? Is it services? Is it products? Is when you have an academy offering right on the public website, we find it really sucks people in, because our hypothesis is that people see an academy as a place of learning, and they see a public website as a place of marketing. And so when they're in the public website, they're like, okay, I get it. It's all marketing, blah, blah, blah. But then they're like, oh, there's an academy. This is the real knowledge transfer. This is where I can actually go to learn. And it's driving. It's like people are like, oh, I'm going to go watch what they have in here. And if they have like little nice short videos, if they have a little how-to, if they talk about 3D modeling and the power of it, or they talk about the power of robotic process automation, general like industry stuff, it really, really helps people get to the point where they want to talk, where they say, oh, I get it. You're giving me great knowledge for free. And I'm to the point where I want to engage with a salesperson, because I actually have I'm educated enough now. We're seeing those academies get used to educate prospects. And then when they buy, it kicks in, like you said, it now kicks into like the real knowledge transfer, the real customer success, the real engagement and usage stuff. So I think and again, high tech had been leading the way on that, but I think that other industries are going to start standing up these academies too, because you can't go to the trade show anymore, right? Yeah. Can't go to the face-to-face meetings anymore. So if we can do this education through these academies, and you said that, I'm just echoing that we see that happening, and we see a lot more people calling it an academy, and I think it makes sense. I think it's great, and I think it's driving a ton of business, specifically now. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've been saying for a long time, especially in the academic world with universities, the days of going to a university, staying in residence, going to class in person, eventually it will change. I just didn't know when that change would happen. All of a sudden COVID hit, and that change is happening. Like a lot. It's happening right now. A lot of students can't go to school in the fall, but they want to continue learning. They don't want to slow the learning process and getting their degree. They want to perhaps accelerate. And so there are different industries that are being forced to change very quickly and figure out how to do it. And I think they're willing to have perhaps, this sounds bad maybe, but have perhaps less quality of a result to get an online learning program in place or digital learning program in place to get people through. And from that, they'll learn. And over time, I don't think that the in-person university will ever go away, but then they'll come out the other end with two options that they didn't have before. And perhaps that extends the ability to make revenue. And so they'll like it because they can hit perhaps a global audience where it was hard to do that in the past. Skilling and reskilling will become very important in the next year or two, where companies, because they have to downsize because of cost constraints, the person who was doing this one job now will have to do two. And it might not be where they had skill set before. Really quickly, a funny example is during COVID, I had to cut my husband's hair. I don't have training in cutting hair, and I know that I've shared this, and so a lot of people have also done the same thing. I was forced to watch a couple of YouTube videos and figure out how to do it. And so I just said, okay, I'll try it. And I did it, 3 times, and each time I got a little bit better. It took me way outside a comfort zone. Like I never thought I would cut hair. And every time I can refine and get a little bit better based on the digital learning I have access to. And these are funny examples, but a technology company or an academic institution, obviously it's a little bit more serious than that, a lot more complex.
But I think we're going to start to see more of the DIY happening, and people trying to figure out how to do it on a low cost budget.
So Sarah, thank you so much. I think that we'll wrap it on those thoughts. And that was a really great conversation. You shared a ton. I think that your background and actually no, and also thank you for being part of Sedgman now, which is an awesome organization. I've talked to a number of. I went to the Sedgman event in Nashville. Danielle Campbell was on the podcast previous or before you. She's awesome. And I'd encourage anybody who's not part of Sedgman and is interested in customer education and everything that we've talked about should check out that. That's CEDMA, Sedgman. And thank you for your time. It's been great. I'd love to talk to you again.